I played the first hour of God of War and Kingdom Hearts, and this is what I found. So for context, God of War, I played on New Game Plus, hence why I already had the Blades of Chaos and some armor. However, this doesn't affect the story in the slightest, or the world building, so it's all okay. As well, I've already played Kingdom Hearts before, so I had some idea of where to go and what to do, but I will try and speak from the mindset of someone who's never played either of them before. So God of War then. Taking place many years after the events of God of War 3, players find Kratos a markedly different character. He remarried, has a son Atreus, and lives a quiet life in the woods of the Nordic realm, Midgard. Unlike previous games in the canon, Kratos' driving motivation of the game is to fulfill his dying wish of his deceased wife, Lufey, who requested Kratos and Atreus to spread her ashes as the tallest mountain in all the realms. The overarching plot is comparatively more centered on the internal struggles of Kratos and his relationship with his son. On the other hand, we have Kingdom Hearts. The premise of the first video game and the main story was as follows. The player played the role of Sora, the main character, a young man who lived on an island with his friends Kairi and Riku, who disappeared after the invasion of some dark beings named the Heartless, in which the hero could defeat by wielding the sword key. So world building. Both God of War and Kingdom Hearts emphasize on story and world building. God of War takes it slow and cinematic, while Kingdom Hearts also takes it slow, but hints at a bigger world beyond what you play in somewhat fast movements with cutaways and cutscenes. God of War feels like you're learning at your own pace. It doesn't force any plot at you hard early on. It still hints at a wider world like Odin and such, but your primary focus, which is the same as Kratos', is what is here and now. Yourself, your recently passed wife, and son. Kingdom Hearts, on the other hand, feels like it has to give you all the information somewhat quick as possible. The intro cutscene leaves you potentially really confused, and the cutscenes involving Donald and Goofy in the beginning, before more is explained, feels like you're playing a completely different game. And Destiny Islands, as simple as it is, doesn't explain much. It feels very empty. Speaking of cutscenes, God of War introduces cutscenes without any single loading screen, just transitions from the normal camera angle to the cutscene angle, while Kingdom Hearts actively begins and ends scenes. Because of this, it strips you completely out of the world and reminds you that you are a player, which is not necessarily a bad thing. However, you truly get enthralled by God of War's seamlessness. The mocap performances in God of War, however, could be the contributing factor to the overall quality of the cutscenes. As best described, programmers who write video games must have a code that produces a stable world that will run without errors, destroying the player's experience of the world. Thus, the making of video games is itself a form of world building and sub-creative activity that can be used to reflect on the nature of what it means to create a world or for players to inhabit one. So it is in the programmer's hands to make the players truly believe that they are living in this world, and unfortunately that code they talk about in this reference is vastly different, primarily because of the time. Games are visually so much more impressive now than they were in 2000, so although Kingdom Hearts immerses you in some ways, it could never compete with God of War's realism and stunning visuals, keeping you entirely immersed in its world. As this God of War game is a reboot, it doesn't force the old story onto you, however it is rewarding to know the old story. Kingdom Hearts is the beginning of the story, but it treats you like there's already a world and a story that has taken place. When talking about world building in another game, Simon Parkin had this to say: while your world soon becomes complex and filled with numerous and sometimes competing objectives simultaneously, the ambience is soothing, your actions greatly shooed along by a spare but cheery piano and synth soundtrack. This is game playing at its most thoughtfully relaxing, with that rare chance in video games that the architect of the world rather than its conqueror. This can be reflected back in both the games that I'm discussing, as it's the music and the visuals that are such a huge draw to these stunning worlds, not tedious objectives that both offer sometimes. Both games don't directly tell you where to go, but God of War subtly guides you to the next location, with its stunning map and its use of Atreus in the story, and Kingdom Hearts characters in the world telling you what your quest is. Both of their worlds are so clear and defined, and you can understand where you go by the landscape. This is important to the world building as explained here. Maps relate a series of locations to each other, visually unifying them into a world, and provide a concrete image of the world. This spatial geographical dimension of fantasy worlds and their self-coherent, consistent nature of them are key components when the genre becomes interactive and playable. So, although both games have a beautiful world, it is clear that one of them takes more of a lead.
Oh, there do they call to me. Oh, there do they call to me.
God of War is an action-adventure game with emphasis on both of those, in addition to hack and slash, and it really does fit that genre, as you are on an adventure with a heavy amount of action, being the hack and slash format that it is best known for. Kingdom Hearts is an action role-playing game with some hack and slash elements, but with rhythm action instead, meaning slower and more timing-based combat. When talking about another game, hack and slash means players will fight close combat with monster fast pace and need to raise character level to beat bosses. This is the same in both of these games. God of War is quick to learn and in some respects funner, as you just get to rush in, button mash till all the enemies are dead, and continue on.
My bow!
No! You are not ready! Stay back!
What's with that Draugr? Draugr!
Atreus!
We're gonna fight that?
We have no choice.
Okay, just tell me what.
Whereas Kingdom Hearts takes time to learn, but can feel more rewarding. You could still potentially rush in. However, with the patterns of the Heartless, it's almost guaranteed to not be as successful.
Ha! Come on! Ha! Come on! Whoa! Come on! Come on! Come on! Come on!
Although Kingdom Hearts is classed as a rhythm action game, when it comes to the first boss battles, both the Giant and the Stranger in God of War, it feels like God of War had more rhythm and timing based action, with dodging at the right time and attacking at the right time. Whereas for Kingdom Hearts, when it came to the first boss battle, all it really felt like you had to do was lock onto the big Heartless's hand or occasionally his head and attack as fast as possible. This could have changed later in the game, but as an introduction to the game, it didn't teach you the responsibility of timing. In the hack and slash genre, it definitely felt as though Kingdom Hearts had more emphasis on it, but never made it as easy to apply. But God of War did it better, maybe because of the release year, but in the rhythm aspect, Kingdom Hearts didn't need it. In fact, I'd argue that it slowed it down and made it more tedious to do. Hence why in some cases, I would simply run past the Heartless because it felt like a waste of time and just an annoyance for me. They're both games in the same genre, and yet they show that just because they're in the same category, they're not the same inside the game. So you should never judge a game based on its genre, because it might just surprise you. Roleplay is another genre that they both have in their listings, and both do a fairly good job. God of War takes roleplay to the immersive level, as explained in previous parts, keeping you in the here and now, making you truly feel like you are the God of War himself. Kingdom Hearts, on the other hand, keeps you enthralled in the world through its roleplay genre, but as explained in the first half, the constant need for cutaways and more exposition and storytelling. However, both of these games come from different walks of life. God of War explores Norse, previously Greek mythology, and religion, whereas Kingdom Hearts has its own lore of the world, avoiding any serious or grounded reality. But when talking on religion in the role-playing genre, even when that religion is brought into the reality of the game, it can often be simplified. As suggested here, they typically demonstrate that minority, subaltern, and marginalized worldviews are relatively underrepresented in the game, or that they are framed in a stereotypical or often negative fashion. Now, although God of War 2018 is more faithful to the Norse gods, the older games were much more stereotypical, and in many ways are shown to be negative, especially considering your character is out to kill them all. As for the action-adventure side of these games, both of them are mainly genred as this. This genre is used in almost all games, so it doesn't define either of them too much, but as touched on briefly before, it is clear that both of these games are shining examples of this. Action adventures rely on level design principles that result in enjoyable exploration, flow, and narrative structure too. This is absolutely the case in really both. God of War has great exploration that is needed to find extra loot that will make you more powerful, however it's not needed to finish the main story. Whereas Kingdom Hearts entirely relies on good exploration to finish the story. Both use the adventure aspect of action-adventure uniquely, furthering my argument that although they are categorized the same, they can and usually do mean wildly different things, And if it hadn't been made clear already too, the action in both these games, although both advertised as hack and slash, end up resulting in entirely different gameplays. So, to conclude, both God of War and Kingdom Hearts go about building worlds you're going to inhabit in different ways. Neither one is the right way, however I'd argue that there is a better way, that being God of War's slow development over Kingdom Hearts' cutscenes and exposition to explain the worlds. As well, although the genres are important for buyers and players to know the type of game they're playing, there is so much more that isn't properly explained in just a simple action-adventure hack and slash title, as shown here with two identical genre games turning out to be vastly different.